Game over. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So simple.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 114 for April 26, 2015, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Thanks for joining us this week, everybody. I'm feeling a lot better than last week, Brendan, when we recorded way later than anticipated. I was deathly ill after coming back from Disney World, but everything's back to normal.
The magic got you sick, I guess.
The magic got me sick, but feeling much better. It's been a good end of the week, and it's a beautiful day here in Kentucky, which is awesome, and got me pretty pumped up for this podcast this week.
Yeah. In fact, I was just with you in Kentucky yesterday, man. We got to see the movie together for once.
It's been a long time, yeah.
like old times. But yeah, the weather was beautiful indeed.
Yeah, so speaking of, you were in town because you had some surprise parties last night. How did all of that turn out?
It was fun. I think I went to bed at 4 a.m.
That's, I guess, always a good sign.
Yeah. Well, because we essentially had two surprise parties going on simultaneously, and one was for my one friend who's moving to Mississippi, so it was a goodbye party for him. The other one was for my friend, her surprise birthday. Her birthday's in a couple days, but each one of them thought that we were throwing a surprise party for the other person, not knowing that they actually had their own party themselves as well. So you basically, it was kind of nicely planned. I got to give kudos to some of my friends for thinking of this, and I mean I just rolled with the punches.
Sure.
I had nothing to do with the planning. I was just there to say, hey, I haven't seen you guys. Put the attention on me, even though it's supposed to be on you. But it was a good time. It was a very good time.
I'm glad it was good. I'm glad it went well. Everyone had a safe night, I hope. So.
Most definitely.
Very cool. For this week's show, it's going to be a lot of fun, as this is the week before the summer movie season really kicks off next week with Age of Ultron. But for this week's show, Brennan and I, we're going to be discussing Child 44, a fun little film starring Tom Hardy and Gary Oldman. And because that film kind of deals with an investigation of sorts, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, we're going to be discussing our top 3 investigation movies. And for our third segment this week, we're going to forego our usual segments, and we're going to give a 2015 summer preview, which I look forward to getting into as well. And before we get into any of that, let's bring on this week's awesome guests. We have Jess and Lindsay from the French Toast Sunday podcast. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hey there. Should have rehearsed our lines.
How are you guys doing? How things going over there? And was it Baltimore you guys are at, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
There's no in the news, I guess. It's going well. It's actually a very nice day out today as well. And I hope spring starts sticking around. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, lazy Sunday.
Anything fun happening over there with you guys with French Toast Sunday?
No, I don't. No. Just don't. No. We have been keeping up with our directors of the month every month. April's coming to a close, but if you want, you can still email links for April Alfonso Cuarón. So anything you wrote about any Alfonso Cuarón movies. And then next month, we'll have a new director, and we've been kind of sticking with that. We just celebrated a 5-year last month.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And yeah.
And
Nice.
for Alfonso Cuarón, we did a little mini episode all about Children of Men.
Oh, nice.
And
it deserves it.
I was the only one on the podcast who hadn't seen it yet.
Oh, okay.
So that was especially a treat for me. But we had a lot of fun talking about that.
Yeah, we stayed on topic almost all episodes. So that was really
nice. It's a bonus. Nice.
Maybe we can learn from you guys, because that's something Katie and I have a real problem doing sometimes.
That is very true. Well, very cool stuff. I definitely highly recommend French Toast Sunday. It's a really fun podcast that I would check out. And what's really unique about you guys being on this show is I got a little pop-up on my Facebook about the Raid 2. And what's really interesting about that, if you guys go back and listen to our Raid 2 discussion, that also featured Jess and Lindsay. And it was this weekend a year ago that you guys were on. So ironically enough, I didn't plan it that way. It just turned out you guys are here exactly a year later. So how fun.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I vaguely remember that we talked about summer movies at the end of the podcast.
I think we did, actually.
That's crazy.
Yeah, crazy how that worked out. That was totally unintentional, but all right, guys, let's get into it.
And here we go.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 114. Brendan, why does this review matter to you?
It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Why are you here?
A child was murdered in Moscow. Found his
What
body. They
are
rolled him
you
over.
doing
Water
here?
came out of his mouth. Same as
Are
this
you
child.
still working for the MTV?
No, I'm no MTV.
No, I think you are.
Oh.
Why are you here? Why are these children so important to Moscow?
Believe me, these children are not important.
Whatever it is you have been sent here to do, remember, you are not in Moscow anymore. Here we have an arrangement. If you do anything to endanger my team, if you report anything which undermines my authority, if you portray my officers as incompetent, if you do any of these things, I will kill myself.
All right, Child 44 is directed by Daniel Espinosa and stars Tom Hardy, Gary Oldman, Noomi Rapace, and a few others that we'll get into. For those that don't know anything about Child 44, there hasn't been a ton of marketing out there. I don't know how many people have seen it. My guess is a lot of you might not have seen it. Essentially, this movie is about a disgraced member of the military police in Russia. Tom Hardy is that disgraced member of the military police, and he investigates a series of nasty child murders that happened during the Stalin era of the Soviet Union. That being said, and all bad accents aside, Brendan, what did you think about Child 44?
Also known as CSI Russia.
Yes, CSI Russia.
Yeah. So good job with the synopsis of that of the film, because I didn't really get that from watching the film, at least as much as I think I should have, because I think that was maybe 20% of the movie.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, but that, I don't know if that just comes to bad marketing. And it's not even bad marketing. This comes to, I mean, like, okay, because you talked about the series of child murders that he's trying to investigate in a time when children were essentially starved to death due to Joseph Stalin's rule and the hunger and famine that he enforced on Ukraine.
Yep.
So it addresses that, but it's really only a small portion of the story, because then you've got aspects of Tom Hardy being forced to denounce his own wife. There's a bit of a dramatic interplay between them as far as why they married each other in the first place. There's a conflict that he has with his own personal internal struggle with the military police in the Soviet Union at this time. And you know, describing that, this all sounds really good and well thought out on paper. The problem is that you've basically got 5 movies going on here, and it creates it creates a very unfocused mess. I mean, it's surprising that this isn't a biography, because all these biographies we've talked about in the past that suffer from these focus issues, it's present even worse here, and it's so disappointing. It's so disappointing, and to the point that it's so jumbled in that regard that you just don't really care about what's going on, because you have no time to invest in each individual element to all these stories. It's all just kind of put together. It's like it'll switch from one point to another. It's like, oh, so now it's the investigation movie. Oh, so now it's back to this internal. Oh, now it's back. Oh, it's now it's such a zigzag of a film. I think that's the best way I can put it, to the point that I just was never dramatically invested, and it was boring for me throughout pretty much all of this. And the one thing I'll also say before I toss it to you is, aside from the performances actually being quite good here for what they have to do, the clip that we showed or that we played earlier between Tom Hardy and Gary Oldman kind of arguing with each other, that's really all Gary Oldman does in the movie.
Yeah.
He's in the movie for a little bit. He shows up halfway through, but his character has no purpose to the story.
And
he
really
really doesn't.
And he's the second top billed actor of the entire thing. But
it makes no sense.
One of these days, Brennan, we are going to get to another Chappie-like argument, but it's not going to be today because I completely agree with you about Child 44. And the thing is, I feel like this could have been a good movie. At the heart of it, I do like it because at its heart,
I agree.
If you really strip back the layers, it's a story about child abuse and neglect and essentially how two characters specifically could never recover, especially in wartime and in this Stalin era of the Soviet Union. And the story is very much dense, as you were talking about. It's very convoluted. It lacked a much needed focus and it meanders quite a bit. And in my notes, I had written down another huge problem to this, and you just touched on it, is that the film introduces several characters that basically do nothing in the movie. Mm-hmm. Jason Clarke is in this. You touched on Gary Oldman, Vincent Cassel, Charles Dance, Joel Kinnaman. All of them are in this movie, and all of them, to a degree, are recognizable names, especially Jason Clarke and Gary Oldman. And they do nothing in this movie. They are literally, it was so distracting because I see these guys' face. I know their names, obviously, and they're in the film for like 5 minutes. I mean, I don't know why you cast these actors who need to be doing better and more prevalent work than what they're doing in this movie. You could have cast B-level or C-level actors that wouldn't have been distracting, that would have put the focus more on Tom Hardy and Noomi Rapace, which it should have been. And that in itself, I think, would have done a lot for this film. And those characters themselves that Jason Clarke and Gary Oldman and Charles Dance are playing, they're almost irrelevant anyway. They're unnecessary. They don't do anything. Gary Oldman specifically is really frustrating because obviously we used him to set up this week's poll, and we'll get to that later in the show. But Gary Oldman doesn't show up until about an hour into the movie, maybe more than that. And then, of course, he's completely wasted, as we were talking about. As you were talking about that clip, that's pretty much the only thing he does in this movie. And he has one scene where he yells at Tom Hardy. Why do you cast Gary Oldman to do that? On top of, forcing them to do these accents that really weren't all that great. Outside of that, though, I do agree with you. The performances are pretty good. But outside of that, I think if you strip a lot of the spy plot thread, I think automatically this gets 100 times better. Because like you were saying, on paper, a lot of this should work, but it just doesn't. And I feel like there's a lot of editing that cuts us from one place to another really fast. I think the pacing is all over the place. And while I think there are seeds of a good idea here, I like the heart of the story because when you get to Tom Hardy and this child aspect of it, and we'll get more into that here in a second, it could have been good. I like that, but it's buried too much in this entanglement and trite plot that just kind of goes all over the place.
I completely agree. Absolutely agree with what you're saying. And I think one of the biggest things I will also support with that is, like, you're right, this does sound good on paper, and there is a theme here that I know we're trying to dig out of this, and we don't have to dig for it. We know it's there. The problem is that there's all these other elements to this story. One of the big ones being his conflict with having to denounce his own wife after her name comes up as a potential spy. And as thrilling as that is on its own, it doesn't really support what the movie is trying to be from the heart. It really isn't about that in many ways. I don't think, at least I didn't personally. I thought it was interesting in and of itself, but it didn't fit the context of what I thought this movie was really trying to be about, so to speak. And things like that were what were really distracting for me. And that's why it really felt like, multiple movies going on here that just did not gel. And as a result, because you have to focus you have to invest all your time trying to care in one element of the story, and then all of a sudden it switches gears into something else because of the bad pacing you're talking about. Then you got to switch all your care and attention to something else. to the point you're doing too much work then.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and you don't care anymore. And then by the time that happens, the movie just becomes boring. And you're also absolutely right about all these supporting characters too. So, but we'll go into that more of that later. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I do want to touch on that a little further because the investigation aspect to me was fascinating, especially when I think you're talking about the starving children because of the era that they find them in. The war itself was a redemption for the Hardy character because he himself was an orphan child and he had come out of this terrible situation and had made a life for himself. And that was a big part of that character. And I think if we would have focused on that more, and while the spy elements of it could have been intriguing, it was very much mishandled. None of that really flowed very smoothly. I felt like we were in and out of both of those elements so fast that you're right. As an audience member, you're having to do a lot of work. But I think the investigation itself is a little interesting, and let's talk about that a little bit because it starts out with one of Leo's friend's sons being murdered, and Leo is the Hardy character, and Leo can't investigate because of the politics of this regime that he finds himself under, but because of where he comes from, and because there is a second child that is murdered, there is something that sparked something in him. And that to me, I found really interesting and that was really frustrating that I wish that they would have done more with because through exposition, we get a chance to understand the Leo character. Like I said, he's an orphan. He sympathizes with children. They really set that up earlier in the film as well, where he essentially saves 2 children from another Russian officer from being killed. And so he knows the pain of a child. He knows what it's like to grow up without parents. And that to me was really interesting. But the film so often cuts its legs out from underneath itself that plot thread eventually becomes very shallow. And there was a scene at the end that could have really punched that home and it just doesn't work. And it was really frustrating to me.
I completely agree because what we talk about what this film was at its heart about child abuse in this time of war and how Tom Hardy's character was a victim of that, and then his redemption, so to speak, when I guess it was when Ukraine overtook I think it was Germany in the first scene when they were in Berlin in 1945. Before then, it cuts to Moscow in 1953 as the present time for this story. Yeah, and I agree with that he has a personal investment in this sort of child cruelty because he was personally victimized by it. And as a result, it starts giving him kind of a sense of, I guess, his own personal confusion about the role that he's actually representing. And that's the interesting thing. That's the interesting dynamic of this movie. But it's not so much about the pacing of this movie you're talking about, because that is definitely it, or the way it intercuts all these other stories going on. It's the way and how and when that it intercuts all these. Cause,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because after Leo's friend's son is murdered, he's actually told to read the report that it was just an accident, and he knows it's a lie. He knows he's only covering that up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And they're just covering up the fact that it could have potentially been a murder because of how they view murder under Stalin's reign at that time. I guess the problem is that after that conflict is built, it literally out of nowhere switches to the whole plot point about him needing to forced to denounce his wife, and that conflict lasts for that lasts for like another maybe 30 or 40 minutes after that, and that's the only focal point of the movie. And then they jump back to the child murder stuff, and that doesn't work.
Sure.
That doesn't work. It's a classic case of I know what you cut from the film, and I also know what you have to keep. And they didn't know that. They obviously didn't know what they had to cut, or because this thing just it doesn't mesh. It just doesn't mesh.
I completely agree, because what it forces is now we have villains that are created out of these Moscow officers in the military that are now forced to go after Hardy. And now you have to continue that plot line, which I don't know if you need to. I think there could have been another way. And I know it's based off of a book, so they might have been just following the book's lead on this. And I haven't read it, so I don't know. But I know that they're trying to force us to be engaged with the relationship between Tom Hardy and Rapace, right? Like, we want to be invested in that relationship, because where it goes, even with the child aspects of things, we want to be invested for that final moment, right? So I kind of get it, but like you were saying, like the way it's handled is the problem here, because it doesn't cut to the right places at the right time. And another thing that could have made this film interesting is we are introduced to the guy who is actually doing these murders. But like the Gary Oldman character, we don't meet this guy until an hour and a half into the movie, and they explain a little bit of it, and then we get some exposition as to why he is a little crazy in the way that he is at the very end, but it's not enough. And it could have been this back and forth of understanding why Leo is invested in this because of what he went through as a child, and then why this other guy, the murderer, if you will, is the way that he is because he was essentially influenced the same way as Hardy. The biggest difference is the war worked in Hardy's favor for him to make a new life out of himself, and then for the murderer, it worked on the exact opposite. But we don't get that. That in itself would have been really interesting and fascinating, and then when they clashed together at the end, it could have been really fascinating, but unfortunately it didn't do that. And instead we get all these other plot lines that just make it too convoluted and too much of a work. As an audience member, it made no sense.
Yeah, and we're also essentially told who the murderer is about halfway through, like you mentioned.
Exactly.
Before, like, we're ahead of the main characters, and it basically creates dramatic irony, which I usually don't like at all when it comes to film. In most cases, it will work, but in a case like this, I didn't like being that step ahead of the characters because it took the mystery away. It took the suspense out of that.
It did,
aspect.
absolutely did.
Yeah, and I also think you're right in the way that they they create this. This relationship between Noomi Rapace and Tom Hardy, that you're kind of meant to care about them. I feel like the story element between him having to denounce his wife was really just it felt like it was just manufactured to create antagonists in this movie.
It was.
That have to go after him. But you're right, it might be in the book, and I don't know how it was handled in the book, if it even was, but I felt like the only reason why that's there is to somehow manufacture like the chase element of people chasing him or something, like he's on the run.
Sure.
And it yeah, but it didn't. It felt manufactured, like I said, and that lessens the authenticity of it.
I wish that they would have created a way for you to get on board with Leah and Reza's relationship without this spy element to it, because what they should have done, I feel like, is either commit to showing us the murderer and then exploring both of them separately so we get an idea of how both of them were affected by the war. Or, like you were saying, let the mystery be there and then don't show us anything to the end and show us the relationship between Reza and Leo and how they come together in this investigation. That would have been enough, I think, for the film. Without having to have the spy elements, you strip all that back, and that in itself, I think, could have been a fascinating film. That, and you would have stripped the 137-minute time for this movie unnecessarily way too long. Down
way
to
too
something
long,
a little bit more manageable. So I wish that that's the route it would have went, but unfortunately it didn't. So that was a little frustrating, I guess. But the one thing I'll say, and then we'll get to final thoughts real quick, is I'd say outside of the child elements, the biggest takeaway for me in this movie, and this is kind of me stretching, but just go with me here, is the idea of commitment, I think, is hit on us through a lot of this movie. And some of it is pretty fascinating, where we have the Leo and the Reza characters. And for one, I'll say on the themes of commitment, Hardy and Rapace give a pretty committed performance. I mean, they really go for it, where the rest of the film is so mediocre. They give some pretty committed performances, and they're really fantastic. On top of that, you have the Reza character who is committed to survival, especially when you find out why she married Leo in the first place, is pretty fascinating and a pretty potent scene, I think. That was pretty interesting. And then on the flip side, you have Leo's commitment to Reza, despite what she says to him, and some of it is pretty heartbreaking, especially when you think about Hardy and those child themes and why that's important to him. There was one moment where he hears a lie, and it just devastates him. But outside of that, Leo is committed to Reza. I think he does have a genuine love for her. that was pretty interesting. And the denouncement scene, as we've talked about, is another example of that in this movie. And then with the murderer, he is unfortunately committed to his addiction of killing these little kids. I think the irony of all that, though, Brennan, is that Espinosa isn't committed to that theme, and instead it becomes a pretty dense and convoluted mess.
Yeah, I the fact that you have to dig for that though and fish for it, I think, is saying something. But I mean, it is there when you do that. But you're absolutely right that it does turn into a mess of what Daniel Espinosa put together. And one of the things I will remember with this movie experience when you and I were in the theater watching it was about 5 minutes in, you whispered over to me saying, I already recognize why this film has problems because Ridley Scott produced it.
Exactly. It was all his fault. God bless Ridley Scott. Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, a great cast, completely wasted and ruined. You have the direction isn't necessarily all that great, and there's bad accents in the movie. So all of it points to Ridley Scott. So yeah, I blame it all on
I
him.
think, yeah, and you're absolutely right with the 137-minute runtime here. I mean, if you trim this down to like a good, like maybe 90-minute thriller that was really mostly about the dynamic between Hardy and even this killer and how they're both affected differently by by wartime as children, I think would have been so
cool.
much more visceral.
Yeah.
I think that would have been
Exactly.
I think that's the film it wanted to be as well. I'm not here saying that I think
so
the
too.
film should have been that. Yeah, because there's one thing to say I think the movie should have been this only because I wanted it that way. That's not a good criticism. In this case, I think it's warranted because the movie did want to go that route and it failed to get to that route. I think that would have helped them, but that's just me.
Completely agree. All right, any other final thoughts, Brendan, and what grade would you give Child 44?
The only last thing I'll say is Joel Kinnaman. We didn't really talk much about him as this quote unquote antagonist. I thought he was. I mean, I guess I thought he did a fine job with what he was given to do because I felt like his character was so one dimensional. But I felt like there was a moment that they tried to make him not they tried to make him multi-dimensional because there's a scene in the beginning when he tries to say hi to them at the dinner table and they just ignore him, so you almost kind of feel like he's like the loner that people don't really like, and then he's kind of the coward. But then instantly he uses that stigma against everyone else to kind of be, well, now this is going to trigger the badassery in me, I guess you can say. But it felt very manufactured. I think there was potential to explore a decent antagonist that way, and they fail in that part. But that's the only other thing I'll say. But regardless, this is one I think you guys can skip. It's all over the place. It doesn't quite work. It doesn't hold together as a cohesive whole. But there is a good movie there somewhere. There's good talking points there, good themes. It just doesn't come together in a full fruition that it deserves. And I would have to give this no more than a C.
Fair enough. I'm right there with you. Two scenes I want to talk about real fast as far as final thoughts. One, the ending scene, which again, I won't go into details to avoid spoilers, but the scene itself I loved because going back to my opening statements is that idea of Hardy and him being affected as a kid into adulthood and how he sympathizes with children is fantastic. So the ending scene on its own, outside of all the other craziness, is amazing. But in the context of the film, it is so manufactured. It does not work. And it was very frustrating because I wanted to like it and you just can't. I mean, or at least I didn't. It just didn't work for me. It was too shallow for me in the way that they explored that. And then the other scene I want to talk about that I think worked a little bit more is right after Leo and Reza discover that she's kind of being pursued as a spy and Leo has to make this decision if he's going to denounce her or not. He understands at that moment they're being followed. And there's a really great scene where they go to this bus stop and Reza goes to get on the bus and Leo grabs her and he kisses her. But I think what was really interesting is that Leo knew that there was people across the street in a car that were looking at him. He knew that they were being followed and he wanted to make sure that they saw him kiss her, which I thought was an interesting character choice. I think Tom Hardy played it really, really great too. And you knew exactly, and he knew exactly where things were going to go after that. That made me buy into the Leo character more in that moment. It made me buy into his genuine love for her, especially in some of those scenes later on, like we were saying with the lie that he finds out about, and also the scene where he's like, I really want to be with you. I bought into it because of that moment. I thought that was a really great moment. I just wish that in the greater context of the movie, it meant something more, but because it meanders, it really doesn't. So like the ending scene, it's just frustrating to me. But all that being said, I agree. It's a wasted cast. Don't go see this movie. It's not worth your time. I'm actually going to give this a C-, and I think that's even a little bit generous. So, but anyway, if you want to read more of our thoughts, go check out our Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm.
And if you agree or disagree with our takes on Child 44, let us know by leaving a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/InSessionFilm or tweet us at InSessionFilm. And you can also leave us a comment on our Google Plus page or email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. If you did like this movie, please let us know. We'd like to hear your reasons why, because I think that this would be a good conversation.
Absolutely,
yeah.
All right, coming up next is the InSession Film Top 3, and we're going to be discussing our top 3 investigation movies.
What's in the box? What's in the box?
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Brendan, so we just got done talking about Child 44, and I gotta say, even though that movie is sort of about this investigation, to find the first-time watchers, guys, you do not have to investigate any further. We're gonna talk to you about them right now.
We absolutely are, and don't worry, unlike Child 44, these guys are not, they do not cause any type of child abuse or anything like that.
Yeah, they are amazing. Yes.
They are amazing. They are a great supporter of our show and definitely a podcast. Everyone out there, you guys got to check them out. Hosted by Tim, Walter, and Hermano. They know their stuff, guys. Check them out.
Absolutely. Their banter is amazing. It's a very entertaining show, unlike Child 44, which is so boring and ridiculous. First-time watchers, though, they're awesome. A lot of fun.
Absolutely. What's unique about them is that every week they will pick out a movie that they've never seen before, watch it and discuss it on their show and create this real fresh and visceral perspective on the movie. They'll also discuss other movies and trailers that they've seen recently. So if you're in the movies, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff there, guys.
Absolutely. And they also give some movie recommendations at their end of their show that I would also pay attention to. And pretty soon I can imagine they're going to be recommending Mad Max Fury Road quite often. So maybe every day after that movie comes out. Anyway, the show overall, it's very smart, it's very fluid, it's easy to listen to. You can tell that they have a lot of fun on their show. So that being said, Brendan, where can you find these guys?
Just look for where they're posting how many days are left till Mad Max, and that's exactly where you'll find them. Thank you for that, Tim, because I keep forgetting that movie's coming out, but then you keep reminding me.
I know, right? Only 14 more days.
I know. But anyway, no, in all seriousness, there are a couple ways you can find them. You can simply go to firsttimewatchers.blogspot.com or also hit them up on Twitter at firsttimewatchers and on Facebook. Just search for First Time Watchers.
Yeah, go subscribe to them on iTunes, and while you're on iTunes, leave them a review. I promise it's absolutely worth your time. Again, go check them out. That's the First Time Watchers podcast.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 114, and now we will be going over our top 3 investigation movies based on our theme with Child 44. Before we get going, did you guys have any criteria that you used to pick your list? We'll start with the folks from French Toast Sunday.
Take it away, Jess.
For me, it was just any movie where there was some sort of mystery that needed investigation to come to the end. I didn't.
Okay.
So you could definitely divide investigation movies down to different subcategories, but I decided not to do that and just go overall just my favorite investigations that took place in a movie.
Okay.
And mine were all thrillers because I like thrillers more. So that was the only reason there.
Okay.
And they were all like, they had to do with a criminal investigation and not reporters or like it had to be like a police the authorities were involved.
Detectives.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Police
And
detectives.
I also cheated, so we'll find that out later.
Okay. Surprise.
Something we're also very good at too.
Very good stuff.
How about you, JD?
Yeah, as far as my criteria goes, the only thing is obviously I wanted the investigation to be a main focal point of the movie. It didn't have to be the entire thing, but the main one. And for me, I wanted to look at some sort of emotional element that spoke to me. That was pretty much where I sat with my criteria.
Yeah, and I'm in the exact same boat with you guys. Really, the biggest thing I wanted to look at was, we were talking about, it had to be like involving investigators, maybe a police force or something like that. So it kind of almost like it was inspired in the tradition of classic film noir. I mean, it doesn't have to be a film noir film, but something that kind of carried on to that kind of tradition. And I also wanted the mystery to be one of the biggest focal points.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I didn't want us to feel like. I wanted the investigation to be a mystery to the viewer. I didn't want it to be a case where we were a step ahead of some of the characters with a sense of like dramatic irony. So I guess a good example would be, let's say like Martin Scorsese's The Departed, a great investigational film, but we kind of know everything that's going on ahead of some of the characters. There's not a whole lot of mystery involved to that.
Sure.
So a film like that I wouldn't include. But that's something else I also wanted to focus on.
Okay.
So with that, let's start with our number 3, Lindsay and Jess. Let's start with you guys.
So now that I'm thinking about it, all 3 of mine are a different type of investigation. Cool. I didn't plan it that way, but apparently I just lucked out. So my number 3 movie is an investigation by a private eye, and I went with Chinatown.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell me, what did the police say?
They're calling it an accident.
Who's the investigating officer?
Lou Escobar. He's a lieutenant.
You know him?
Oh, yeah.
Where from?
We used to work together in Chinatown.
Would you call him a capable man?
Very.
Honest?
As far as it goes. Of course, he has to swim in the same water we all do.
Of course, but you've no reason to think he's bungled the case.
None.
That's too bad.
Too bad?
Disturbs me. It makes me think you're taking my daughter for a ride. Financially speaking, of course.
This movie is just deserving of every accolade that it gets. Like, one of the best written screenplays, amazing performance and direction, all of that. And I think the story here is really interesting because you kind of start with a typical noir premise with the mysterious woman who possibly is leading Jack Nicholson's character down a misguided path.
Yeah.
But then it ends up being related to this whole other intrigue, which it's about water and corporate type things, which really shouldn't be that interesting. But it actually really is in this movie. And I think those are some of the best kinds of movies where they can make something pretty basic very fascinating. And then there's also like excellent family dynamics here. He gets in over his head. He gets some unwanted slashing.
Yeah, sure.
And it ends like very dramatically and it's got a huge payoff that's pretty devastating, but just it doesn't really sugarcoat anything.
It's like a perfect detective story, really. I mean, it throws everything at you, but it manages it all so well that, like you said, like by the time you get to the end, you're not only are you shocked, but you're satisfied with like all the conclusions, and it kind of gives like a daring ending.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I think what we saw that together, and we both thought that was like beyond the expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Sure. Yeah, I was with you guys. In fact, the first time that I watched this, I was so intrigued and compelled by the movie that as soon as it was over, I rewatched it again in its entirety because I loved it. It's absolutely fantastic. That's a great choice.
Yeah, and I'll just echo those sentiments that, and I can kind of jump right into it because that was also my number 3 on my list. So I'll just kind of jump to that right now, just to get this out of the way. Because for all the reasons you guys are just talking about, this movie is absolutely fantastic. But I think the real kicker for me is like you kind of think about how this film was first released. I think it was 1974. I think it first came out, and you get to that climax, and basically some of the family dynamics that happen toward the third act of this film. It's not only devastating, it's really ahead of its time for a movie to tackle something like that in the early 70s to the mid 70s like that. It's very like taboo subject matter, and it's disturbing. It really is. But
yeah.
I give so much respect for this movie to be able to tackle that and get away with it, and it was well received at its time as well.
Yeah.
And it's so thrilling, and so Roman Polanski I think is a phenomenal director.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, he's so good here.
Yeah.
I love this film.
It's great. The way that everything ties together so perfectly. That ending is so incredibly well earned. I love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's also crazy because from the beginning, you would never even fathom that it would be going there. Like it ends in a completely different place than it starts.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree. So was that both your number 3, Lindsay and Jess?
No, that's just Jess's. Usually what happens is whatever movie I think of first for my list somehow finds a place within my top 3, whether it's deserved or not. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't, but for me personally, that's how I've kind of always played the game, because if something comes to my mind first, it must have some sort of importance within my little brain. And that one is going to be my number 3 for this list. And I chose a pretty recent film, Prisoners, which was a movie that I felt like I really enjoyed, but because we didn't review it or necessarily I don't know if we talked about it on our show, it was one that really went under the radar, and I've been meaning to watch it since. The basic premise, Jake Gyllenhaal is a detective that's trying to find a missing girl, and there's also a whole nother subplot about how the father is dealing with the disappearance of his daughter, and that's very compelling. But as far as the investigation goes, I just really liked the way they played out with first of all, Jake Gyllenhaal is fantastic in it. He was right at the beginning of his hot streak, and there's good performances all around, but it was always an interesting investigation to me, and it was the first thing that came to my mind when I thought of this movie. So maybe that's just telling me I really need to rewatch this again. But it's also beautifully directed, and it's got some great cinematography, and I'd recommend it to anybody that's a fan of the genre.
I love the dynamic between like Jake Gyllenhaal's very straightforward, methodical investigation, and then Hugh Jackman's like vigilante investigation.
It's really different, and I think that
the contrast is great.
I'm sure I could have thought of other things for the list as far as police procedurals go, but it's always interesting to me when you have movies that follow a detective that's like the best at their job, because it's one of those jobs that's almost impossible to be perfect at because you have emotions and they get in the way. And here it's illustrated pretty distinctly between someone who has all the emotion in the world because they're at the heart of the case, and then someone that has to try to detach themselves enough but also still be like a human being. And Gyllenhaal really struggles with that throughout the movie. So it's a really good one. And it has some cool twists and turns, so I like that.
It does.
Yeah, and there really is a good human element to this movie. I think is what really helps it stand apart. And it's so well directed. I think, I don't even know how to pronounce the director's name. Is it Denis Villeneuve, I think it is?
Villeneuve, something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, I think probably one of the better directors working today. Very underrated, and I would love to see this guy get more recognition, and hopefully he does when he does the Blade Runner sequel, so we'll see how that happens.
There's like some insanely beautiful shots with it that still stick out in my mind.
Yeah, very true. Cinematography is amazing.
Roger Deakins, man.
Yeah,
Roger Deakins.
Incredible. Mm-hmm.
All right, JD, what's your number 3?
Well, for my number 3, first I want to say that I'm very much like Jess, actually, after looking at my list as well, in the sense that all 3 of my picks are a little bit different as well. And for my number 3, I'm going with my more police procedural pick, and that is David Fincher's Seven.
I saw you with the box. What was in the box?
Because I envy your normal life.
Put the gun down, David.
It seems that envy is my sin.
No, what's in the box? Not till you give me the gun. What's in the box? Give me the gun.
He just told you.
You lie! You're a f***ing liar! Shut up!
That's what he wants. He wants you to shoot him.
No! No! You tell me that's not true. That's not true.
Become vengeance, David.
Nah, she's all right. You tell me.
Become wrath.
Tell me she's all right!
You made her a suspect, David.
No!
Just throw it all away, you know.
No!
She begged for her life, Detective.
Shut up!
She begged for her life.
Shut up.
And for the life of the baby inside of her.
Ah!
He didn't know.
And that follows Somerset, played by Morgan Freeman, and Mills, which is the Brad Pitt character. And of course, they're hunting this serial killer that uses the 7 deadly sins as his motif for his killings. And that's when you enter in Kevin Spacey at the end of the movie, which is absolutely just riveting. The way that he plays that character, and the investigation itself is exciting to watch. It's arduous to watch at times. There are some really frightening and disturbing scenes in this movie, which is all just enthralling altogether and very tragic. And of course, you get to that box scene at the end, which is engrossing and very heartbreaking all at the same time. I think it's incredibly well earned. The acting in this movie is just through the roof, and is probably, I'd have to think about it. I know we discussed this last year when we were talking about Gone Girl, Brendan, but I think 7 is still my favorite Fincher film. I love this movie. I would like to give it a rewatch sometime soon, but this movie has certainly stuck with me ever since the first time I watched it, and was easily a choice that came to the surface right away when we were discussing investigation movies. So I absolutely love it, and 7 makes my number 3.
That is a fantastic movie, and it is an honorable mention for me. Maybe if I really had to rank them all, it might be like number 4 or something like that. Mainly because there may be another Fincher film represented on my list, but we'll get to that point later.
Yeah.
But maybe I will say it. It's probably my second favorite Fincher film, behind this other one. But
sure,
7 is ever engrossing and frightening. What a movie!
Incredible, yeah.
All right, so let's get to number 2. Lindsay and Jess, what do you guys have at number 2?
Go ahead. So my number 2 is the journalist investigation on my list, and I went with a very recent watch for me. Just saw it this year, but it was excellent. I went with All the President's Men.
Yeah, I excluded.
Oh, nice.
Amazing though. Yeah.
It was just so riveting from start to finish, and it's definitely one of the more fun investigation movies because of the dynamic between Woodward and Bernstein, or Woodstein as they like to call them, or Burnwood. What do they call them?
I don't know.
I think it's Woodstein. But what a great duo! Like, just great interactions between the two of them. The scene where they're in the middle of their little deep throat investigation, and they're kind of starts to hit the fan, and they know like they're onto something hot, and they're just going back and forth in the apartment. And
the
then
one guy throws the cookie.
Yeah, he throws the cookie, and he's like, "I don't want a cookie.
I don't want a cookie." Yeah.
So funny, like random part that's just like hilarious. And there's a lot of little parts like that give the movie some levity, even though it's such an important story, and the investigation just looks insane. Like, what a crazy thing to crack open, and it's almost unfathomable that it's real, and that of all the secret things that the government has absolutely done over the years that have never surfaced, this one they found out about. And it's just one of those big things that, like, this is why journalism is so important.
Right.
Sure.
Because of
Yeah.
this.
I mean, it's the movie everyone brings up when they talk about these, like, especially like journalist films, but it's incomparable. There's nothing that can even touch it. Not only because it's well made, but also it's hard to create that sense of investigation nowadays. I feel like with so I hope this isn't on anyone's list, but like I'll bring up like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is a movie that does a really good job taking a journalistic investigation and like putting that in the world now with computers, and that's insanely difficult to do though cinematically. Not everyone is David Fincher, so to go back to something that where it was like real nitty gritty like reporting, like scratching your notes and following your leads, and it's just so fun to watch. I mean, that's like those are the best type of
Yeah, pen to paper, looking up through like tons of paper resources to find the one piece of information you need. Like, just real throwback, like, this is the way journalism was when it was like super serious and you couldn't just tweet out like your first initial thing that you just heard without even fact checking it.
And both that and Chinatown, they're some of the, like, why I always champion the fact that like the 70s were the best time for film because they were.
It's good. It was a good era. Yeah.
they were like putting endings or like themes that we were just talking about now that like even now that we've, progressed certainly in some aspects as far as taboos or whatnot, they don't even touch it. They were so daring back then about what they were like, even the way like All the President Men's ends, it kind of ends like on an abrupt note of like, here, we got it done. Yeah. And it's because everybody watching knows the outcome. So it's sort of, I don't know.
It's not like they had some like glory ending where it was like, oh, here's like the rosy part. They were just like, you got to see the investigation, and that's the point of this whole movie.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's a really good choice and a really great honorable mention for me, just because my quote unquote journalistic investigation is just one of my favorite movies of all time. But this one, for all the reasons you guys were talking about, it's terrific. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend seeking it out. It's a great choice.
And I must confess, I haven't seen it.
Well, there you go, Brendan.
Okay, I guess I'll be the first one to eat that up. So what was your number 2, Lindsay?
My number 2 is one of just... this movie, I think, gets shadowed a lot by a very iconic performance, but at its heart, it's one of, if not... It's one of the best movies ever made about an investigation, and it just proves how thrillers, and especially crime thrillers, can be some of the greatest movies of all time, and that is Silence of the Lambs, which it's a movie I think it's real easy to forget about like the ins and outs of it if you haven't seen it in a while because, Hannibal Lecter and all the famous lines and all that great stuff, and believe me, that is amazing and it definitely elevates the film, but everything happening with Clarice, who's almost a more interesting character, is fascinating, and the case itself is really great, and it's, I think, gave way to a lot of other like shittier versions of, pulpy sort of serial killer crime stories, but this is just so fantastically well made and interesting, and there's so many components to it that when you rewatch it, you're just initially as enthralled as you were when you first seen it. Like, I mean, it's a movie, if I could, I'd love to go back and like watch for the first time again, just to get all those thrills, but it's, if you don't know anything about Silence of the Lambs other than Hannibal Lecter, I feel like a lot of people would be really surprised at how great the movie is. I mean, it's so well made.
It won 5 Oscars.
And that's true, I guess. But I don't know. I think maybe because, I don't know. It's just, I think like its resonance is all with Lecter. So it's hard to remember that it's really about a case and not so much just about him. And it's really about another serial killer who's equally as crazy. And all that is fascinating as well. But it's astoundingly well made.
Yeah, that's a great honorable mention for me as well.
Yeah, without the success of Silence of the Lambs, would we have such great, pulpy, female detective 90s classics
as the Bone Collector.
Kiss the Girls, Along Came a Spider.
You got it.
Those are like Lindsay and I's bread and butter. Like, that's what we like loved watching all the time growing up.
And while they are not comparable in quality, still the genre is really fun.
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun.
It makes a good point of how influential The Silence of the Lambs was, because that really started a trend with those films. And even if you don't look at it from the female angle, we talked about a movie like Seven. I mean, Seven definitely has the inspiration from a grotesque aspect that Silence of the Lambs definitely brought. And Silence of the Lambs really did do a lot for the crime investigational genre, if you will. And we have to thank a lot to it. We really do. So, JD, what's your number 2?
Well, I don't need to spend a lot of time with my number 2 because we've discussed it a lot at your guys' number 3s. My number 2 is Chinatown for all the reasons you guys said. I mean, the only thing I guess I'll add to it, outside of course, it's a really great script, maybe my favorite script of all time. And the mystery is just enthralling. But what I really love about this movie, too, is one of the last shots of Jake just walking away from the scene and the look on his face. And this is a guy who we find out throughout the movie has seen a lot of terrible stuff. And, you know, there's that line at the end where it's like, it's Chinatown, right, Jake? It's just Chinatown. Like, this is a guy who has seen things before. And despite all of that, when that last moment happens and the tragedy is there, he's still lost in that moment, and he's lost in himself. And like I said earlier, I just kind of love how Polanski wraps everything up, and I love how he wraps that character up specifically. I think it says everything about what that movie was doing was in his face as he was walking away. It's absolutely superb. So Chinatown, I could talk about for days. It's probably in my top 10 of all time. I love this film. So it's a great one.
Yeah, it really is. And Robert Towne won the Oscar for Best Writing for that film, too.
Absolutely should.
Yeah. Well deserved. Well deserved. Yes. So for my number 2, I'm going back even a little bit further. This is kind of like my classic pick. And in my opinion, I think maybe one of the first few films to really kind of build upon the aspect of the surprise ending, if you will, in a very frightening way. But I'm going with the classic Hitchcock film Vertigo, starring Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak.
Where are you now?
Here with you.
And it's all real. It's not merely as it was 100 years ago, or a year ago, or 6 months ago, or whenever it was you were here to see it. Now, Madeline, think of when you were here.
There were not so many carriages then. There were horses in the stalls. They, 2 black and a gray. It was our favorite place. But we were forbidden to play here. Sister Teresa would scold us.
Well, also one of the best romances I've seen on screen in the investigational genre. And I love the themes of battling with obsession and the symbolism of his vertigo with that and his overcoming of that vertigo in the end when everything starts coming full circle. This is a fantastic movie, a movie that was apparently not very well received when it first came out, and it's definitely one that probably wasn't for everyone, that really pushed the boundaries as what you could do with this genre at that point. It definitely kind of broke ground what people were used to at the time with what classic film noir was doing, and it's a very frightening film in its own way. The subject that this guy's trying to investigate the occurrences of this woman that's almost supernatural, and whether it is or not, I mean, I won't spoil how the movie ends, but it's so interesting.
Yeah.
And the way he really doesn't fall in love with her, but falls in love with, I guess, his perception of her, and I just love the obsession that is dealt with in this movie. It's so, your heart kind of breaks for Jimmy Stewart in this movie.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
It really does, and the way he was able to kind of create that heartbreak without seemed kind of creepy and in an over-the-top way that would have ruined the way I reacted to the movie. It's a great film, an absolute joy to watch.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrific. I'd say this was a very good honorable mention for me. This and Rear Window, I thought about a lot for the list. Hitchcock, man, he's just incredible when it comes to this and developing those characters that you can really just engage with throughout the entire movie. And because of my criteria, both of these were very, 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 very close to making my list. If we had a top 5, they both probably would have made my top 5.
And totally understandable, and there's just too many out there. But Hitchcock was the master of suspense, and this film, even Rear Window as well, which still holds up from a suspenseful standpoint, just proves
I agree.
the master of a craft right there.
It's incredible. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, let's get to number 1. So, Lindsay and Jess, what did you guys have as your number 1 top investigation movie?
So my number 1 was already said by JD. It's the David Fincher classic, Seven. Mm-hmm. And it's quite hard to pick between the David Fincher movies on this list.
It is hard, yeah.
I focus on investigation, and it was very hard to pick between 2 particular movies that are so specifically about like the investigation total. Yeah. But I went with Seven just because it's a movie that ever since I saw it in high school, I've watched it at least once a year, every year. And the other movie I just haven't spent as much time with. Mm-hmm. But Seven it even grows greater every time I watch it. And like you said, JD, it just has a lot of great things going for it. It's super dark, but I also love how it mixes together the more exciting like chase scenes that come with detective films and the more like practical, like in the library doing research, taking notes. And it mixes both the old detective and the new detective. And it has one of the best payoffs as far as endings.
Yeah, no kidding.
A lot of investigation movies don't quite either reach that or you're not surprised. And it's also pretty risky to introduce the killer as not like, it didn't end up being like someone we were introduced to earlier in the movie.
Yeah,
it wasn't someone who was another cop or anything like that, which is very typical. It was someone who we'd never seen on screen before. And, well, you never met the character before.
Sure.
And maybe it's just because of who it was played by, but it works so perfectly.
Yeah, it's a great point that it's not really a whodunit at that point. Then the surprise element comes afterward, and this is like the modern day X-rated film noir is the way I've always kind of see it. But it's what a fantastic film, and we'll get to Fincher in a little bit because I've got a special place reserved for Fincher on right now.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Yeah, Fincher is awesome.
It really is. How about you, Lindsay? What's your number one?
Yeah, that little bit's about to get a little bit shorter.
Uh-oh.
You really should have taken into account the fact that you have the biggest Fincher fangirl in the world on the show. So quite easily, those other two I mentioned would not have been on this list had I done this correctly. But I cheated, and I'd like to just say the majority of Fincher's filmography would be at my number one, which is not at any stretch. There's no hyperbole that anytime he releases a movie, it is my favorite movie of the year. Maybe unfairly, I don't think so. I think the guy's magnificent.
He is great, yeah.
If I had to pick one though for this list just to chat about, because I specifically didn't say anything about Seven while you guys were talking because it's just phenomenal. It is so well made and the thematic elements are intense. Okay, that's not my number one. It is, but it's not. So the one I'll talk about is the movie to me that most encapsulates investigation, and that is Zodiac.
It was right after the murder at the lake.
And what did you tell this officer?
I told him that I'd gone to Salt Point that weekend to skin dive, that I was alone, but I met a couple there. I have their names at home if you want them.
That would be great, Arthur.
Lee.
What?
Lee. Nobody calls me Arthur. Also, that day when I came home, my neighbor saw me. It was around 4, but I forgot to tell the other officer that.
Neighbor's name?
Bill White. He died a week or so afterwards. Heart attack, so I didn't think to call to follow up. The knives I had in my car with the blood on them, that blood came from a chicken that I killed for dinner.
What?
I had knives in my car that weekend. Maybe Bill saw them and called the other officer on me.
Zodiac is a movie that's literally all about the investigation. Yes, there's elements of how obsession affects different men within the movie, but it's really about this need, this discovery, this investigation into who the Zodiac killer is. I was familiar with the case before I watched the movie, so I thought that was also an interesting side note going into it. But there is so much greatness. This movie sort of evokes elements of All the President's Men with the collaboration between the reporter and the cartoonist who has his own obsession, and then the police work, and then it also shows how muddled the police work gets and how the detectives between counties can't come to a conclusion on certain elements, and just it's got everything of the makings of a real life case because it is a real life case, and it's just handled with all that Fincher style, and you really get to see how this affects all these different men. So you have the reporter, you have the detective, and then you have the outsider that's obsessed, and they follow all three of those and how they converge on this one case, and maybe they do, maybe they don't get answers. So it's just a really amazing look at investigation, and it kind of covers all the bounds. But I could have named plenty of other Fincher movies for this list, so that'll be my number one.
Yep, and there is my number one. Then that's what I was waiting for. And
I knew it.
You know, JD, yeah, because I've told you many times that Zodiac is my favorite Fincher film.
I know this movie is going to have to be in your personal penalty box. I think you've picked this way too many times.
Not in I haven't picked it that much in the top 3. I don't think I have.
You had this like 4 weeks ago.
Oh, that was one time. One time.
Okay.
So how about this? Next time this is going to come up, I'll leave it off for my criteria, just for you, just to make you happy.
Fair enough.
But I won't go too much into it, obviously, because Lindsay, I think you just hit the nail on the head 100%. But you're absolutely right. What makes this movie so thrilling and so enthralling is the fact that it's real. This is a real story.
Yeah.
But what I love so much also is the main character that you're really kind of that you're supposed to be following along with this is not this hotshot police officer or this real smart or clever character. I mean, he is smart and clever in his own way, but he's a cartoonist for the San Francisco Chronicle. He's a relatable guy, and he's easy to relate to, which made the following of this case even more interesting and kind of more visceral in many ways too. And talking about how visceral this movie is, that one scene at the I guess it's. I don't know if it's a park or right by it's by at the lake when that couple is tormented by the Zodiac killer, and then it ends with that stabbing scene that kind of comes out of nowhere. That still frightens me every time I watch it. I quiver every time I see that scene.
Yeah, it's crazy.
This is like the perfect culmination of David Fincher's more visceral and frightening style that you see in Seven, with also his more modern maturity, kind of what you see maybe in like Gone Girl, even The Social Network as well. I feel like it's like a greatest hits of his styles in this movie, and it's easily my favorite Fincher film, probably easily one of my top 10 favorite films of that decade as well. It's magnificent.
It's great. And you bring up that scene by the lake, Brendan. That's probably like in my top 5 scenes of that decade. I think it's absolutely terrific. And I think another thing about this movie that I love is that there's no wrapping up of the story. Like, there's an investigation, but we never find out who the actual killer is, which is so unique for this genre as well. And because it is a real life story, it's kind of scary in some ways. I mean, the guy may not be alive anymore, but the fact that they never found this killer and that it's open-ended the way that it is, I think just adds another layer to the film. It's just phenomenal work.
I completely agree. And I love how Fincher, at least, he kind of gives us that moment, but he also doesn't at the same time. I think he has that balance really well at the end. Yeah, absolutely. So, JD, what is your number one?
Well, my number one is my journalist investigation movie, and this is one of my favorite movies of all time. And as much as I was joking with you, Brennan, about Zodiac being in your personal penalty box, even though I haven't picked this a ton, I've only picked it maybe 1 or 2 other times, but eventually it's going to have to be in my personal penalty box as well. But my number one is Citizen Kane. And of course, a lot of people know this already. This is an investigation, not by police or private eye, but pretty much journalists and really everyone that knows Kane as to what Rosebud means. Like, there's an investigation as to find out what that is. Everyone needs to know. And I think what's also fascinating about this, even kind of going back to what I was just saying about Zodiac, is even though the audience knows, no one in the story ever finds out what Rosebud is. And it's really heartbreaking when you think about it. We talked a lot about this on our Extra Film podcast, Brendan, back in January, when you find out what it really is, how that impacts the Kane character, especially when it comes to childhood experiences and how that ties into adulthood, which I think is another great theme that ties into our Child 44 theme this week, although this movie, of course, does it 1 billion times better than that movie. But I love it for all those reasons. And that investigation is not only compelling to me, I love how it influences our characters, and what it meant to the Kane character specifically is something that really touches me, that really affected me quite a bit, and why it's my favorite movie of all time.
And it's such a human story, kind of similar to what we talked about with a movie like Prisoners, that it focuses on the humanity of the investigation, which makes it that much more compelling. But when you get to that finale, it's heartbreaking because it's so relatable to almost anyone when you really think about it. It's a fear that once we get to a certain point in our lives at a certain age, it's something that we're all going to possibly experience and ponder about. and hopefully we're not in the same case as someone like Kane was, and we at least hope that we're at a better position than he was. But this is a fantastic movie. We did a whole extra film review on this movie, and
definitely go and check that out.
Yeah, I think if anyone gave this less than an A+, I'd say let's punch him in the face.
Looking at you, Matt Oakes.
Oh, he would, but he's more critical about his grades. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
That's true.
So continuing on, did you guys have any honorable mentions that you also wanted to throw out there that didn't quite make your list? We'll start with you, Jess.
My honorable mentions were Gone Baby Gone, which is very good, but isn't quite as exceptional as the top three on my list.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Insider, which I've only just seen and isn't as focused on the investigation. It's more so about journalism in general. So I kind of ditched that one. Brick, which is just a very cool movie, and Angel Heart, which is just a crazy movie. So, yeah.
Nice.
Mine were Gone Girl and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
All the David Fincher movies.
Basically.
How about you, JD? Honorable mentions.
I didn't have a ton of honorable mentions, but I also had Brick. I had Rear Window and Vertigo, as I talked about, and I also threw on Memento and The Maltese Falcon were honorable mentions that I had.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in the same boat. I mentioned Seven, Silence of the Lambs, Rear Window, as well as Memento is also one on my list as well. Probably my favorite Christopher Nolan film, to be honest. I also had Mystic River, and that one probably would have also potentially made my top three, but since we dedicated so much time to it not too long ago, JD, I decided I didn't want to talk about that one again since it was still so recent.
Absolutely.
I also included Fargo, LA Confidential, and another classic, Sunset Boulevard, which I think is another fantastic film that they have just also added on Netflix. I think people should go check out if you haven't seen that one yet. But a lot of good investigation movies out there, man.
Yeah.
A lot of good thrillers, a lot of good mystery films. It's definitely a compelling genre that'll never get old.
Absolutely. So let us know how your picks stack up against ours. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com or leave a comment on Facebook or Twitter or on our site at InSessionFilm.com.
All right, before we move on, let's talk about this week's poll.
It's real bad, okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll? Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
All right, so for our poll this week, we simply had an actor battle this time. Tom Hardy versus Gary Oldman. We asked you to pick which one you'd want to win in a battle, I guess essentially is how I'd see it.
Yep.
So the results came in, and to be honest, I'm a little surprised. I don't know about you, JD, but Gary Oldman won by 57.1% with Tom Hardy trailing at 42.9%. Pretty close race. Tom Hardy's on such fire these days. I guess I would have actually anticipated it going the other way.
Yeah, I could certainly see that because a lot of times it's so easy to think in the terms of now and what's hot, and Tom Hardy is certainly that guy, but Gary Oldman just has that resume. He's been around for a long time. He's done a lot of great work, and I was a little surprised, but not at the same time. I was expecting Hardy to kind of get more votes because of that factor, because of the It kind of Now thing.
Sure.
But at the same time, when people kept tweeting in or on the poll itself or on Google Plus, people kept saying Gary Oldman. So it kind of didn't surprise me that it went that way at the same time. So I think when it's all said and done, I think Hardy could overtake Oldman 20 years from now if we did this exact same poll. But right now it doesn't surprise me. My vote would probably go to Hardy because I love the guy dearly, but I love Gary Oldman too.
I love them both. I think also my pick may have gone to Tom Hardy just for a slight edge. So far his resume, I've been just more preference towards, I guess you could say. And I love his diversity as an actor as well, which Gary Oldman also has. He also has that. But let's just hope that these results are not based on the film Child 44, because then we have a problem. Then we have an absolute problem.
I highly doubt it. I don't think anyone saw that besides you and I. So
maybe we should keep it that way.
Lindsay and Jess, if you had to choose between the two, where would you vote on this poll?
I'd go with Gary Oldman, simply based on not just his full resume, but in particular his role in True Romance, which just completely just elevated my opinion
That's fair.
where it was, which was high, to just even higher.
He just has way too many. He has a lot more memorable performances than Hardy, just because Hardy's resume is shorter. I think Hardy's really versatile, but I mean, Gary Oldman can make a bad movie watchable. So,
well, I would argue the same for Hardy though too, and that's why, like, to me, I kind of see him on the same playing field. I get the fact that because Oldman's been around a lot longer, he just has more of a resume, which is ultimately why he ended up winning the poll, I think. But I kind of see him on the same playing field. In fact, I eventually think Hardy will overtake that because he has the same kind of qualities to him. Except I think he can even go further, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, we probably just haven't seen that further quite yet because he's still a pretty fresh actor. I mean,
he is
you
very much.
Look at it. Yeah. People only have really been talking about him for maybe the past 5 or so years, I guess. I think
maybe
really
not even that.
Yeah. I mean, we saw him in Inception in 2010, and that was really like, this guy is worth watching. But he's been in some great stuff beforehand. Who is this guy?
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, thanks to everyone that voted on the poll this week. We really do appreciate it. All right, stay tuned. Coming up next, we are going to give a preview of this year's summer movies. We'll talk about some of the bigger releases. We'll talk about some of the small releases. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Here's the thing. We started out friends. It was cool, but it was all pretend. Yeah. Since you've been gone.
You're dedicated. You took the time. Wasn't long till I called you mine. Yeah. Since you've been gone.
And all you ever hear me say is how I pictured me with you. That's all you ever hear me say. But since you've been gone, I can't breathe for the first time. I'm so moving on. You've been gone. How can I put it?
Hey guys, I just want to pause for a quick second to say a huge thank you to those that are supporting the show. If you want to help support us, you can just go to our website at InSessionFilm.com, click on that bonus content tab on our main menu, and you'll hear some awesome bonus content for just a small donation of 99 cents. They actually are free to listen to, but we do encourage and appreciate that small donation. And next week for our bonus content, not this week, but next week with Avengers Age of Ultron, we are going to be doing another edition of Settling the Score with Mark Herney. That's going to be a lot of fun, so be on the lookout for that. You can also just donate directly to the show. So if you go to InSessionFilm.com/donate, you can either do a one-time donation via PayPal or sign up for a monthly subscription service. Either way, we really appreciate your support.
I'm definitely looking forward to that next round of Settling the Score, I gotta say, man.
Yeah,
definitely good ways to support us. And for all those that are supporting us, again, huge thank you to you guys. We cannot thank you guys enough. We really appreciate it. But there are also some other ways that you can support us. One of them being the InSession Film store, which we also have. You can find that at InSessionFilm.com/store. We've got a lot of cool items there. If you want something with our logo on it, a nice mug, a nice tie, things like that, even a nice T-shirt, we're going all out. We're going out. Lots of things like there. And if you have any ideas of any other things that you want, definitely let us know. We'll see if we can get that happen.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll create an InSession Film super hero logo that you can get
superhero logo
that you can get tattooed on your chest or something like that.
Exactly.
That'd be interesting. And lastly, we also mentioned at the very beginning of the show that we are sponsored by Audible.com. So what you can do is you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial by going to www.audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. They've got over 150,000 titles for you to choose from for all your smart devices such as your iPhone, Android, or Kindle, or whatever you may be using. But that's another way that you can also support us. You can just go to audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. So we really appreciate support there as well. Absolutely appreciate it.
Yeah, so no matter what you do, even a subscription to iTunes or like on Facebook or follow on Twitter, all of that goes a long way. We really do appreciate it.
Put me on. I even fell for that stupid love song. Yeah. Since you've been gone.
Hi, this is Greg.
This is Chuck.
And this is Dan. And we are Talking in Circles.
Because the world needs another podcast, we are here as Geekcast Radio's newest edition. And as the title says, each week we get lost in conversation about a wide range of topics, including movies, comics, games, art, TV, and even occasionally sports.
We play games and discuss pivotal topics like who would win in a fight, the Kool-Aid Man or Tony the Tiger, and examine the hot-button issues of the world of geekdom.
We keep things fresh by taking timeless topics in new directions.
We are simply three friends having a fun time talking about life's most fascinating foibles.
Stay connected with us every Tuesday on iTunes or at geekcastradio.com.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 114, and now we're going to be giving a 2015 summer preview.
We have learned more in the past decade from genetics than a century of digging up bones. A whole new frontier has opened up. We have our first genetically modified hybrid.
You just went and made a new dinosaur?
Probably not a good idea. Almost 40 feet high. Really think she climbed out?
Depends.
On what?
What kind of dinosaur they cooked up in that lab.
All right, guys, let's just jump right into it, and I'll toss it to you first, Lindsay and Jess. I guess, Lindsay, you can go first this time.
Yeah.
What summer movie are you most excited about this year?
I don't know. I really don't. I was like looking over it and I thought, all right. So Avengers kicks off next week, right?
Yep.
It's one of the biggest titles. And I loved the first one. I was very skeptical and I thought the first Avengers was really, really awesome.
Yeah.
And too much time has passed. My interest has waned. I'm excited to see it and I hope it's going to be good. But I don't know. I think I'm very, very excited to see Mad Max because from the trailers, I don't think it could be bad. I think it can only be so bad it's good, if that's even possible. It just looks so...
It looks so mad. It just looks mad.
Great. It's so good.
Really watchable. But I mean, as far as things I'm anticipating, I feel like I've been really outside of what's been going on. And so for the summer movies, I only know like all the tentpole movies. So I guess I'm excited for Mad Max, but there's a lot of... I mean, even Jurassic World, I'm excited for because Jurassic Park's one of my favorite movies, but I mean, it is, I don't know, there's a lot of reboots, a lot of sequels. I mean, I know this is old, this is like an old complaint, but there's nothing particular that has caught my attention as much. I think Mad Max looks like a lot of fun, though.
What about you, Jess?
Jurassic World for sure, but besides that, I'm really looking forward to Trainwreck. I think that's really funny. And Amy Schumer's like on fire right now. Yeah. And speaking of on fire, Magic Mike XXL.
I did forget about that.
You know, I'm unashamed about my excitement for that movie. I'm actually pretty excited for it too.
I noticed how everyone got quiet when you said that.
No, there ain't nothing wrong with that. The first one's funny.
Yeah.
I didn't say that anything was wrong with that. I'm just commenting that it got quiet. Because I actually enjoyed the first one as well. I enjoyed it.
I just hope me and Jess get like a screening for this one. Because when we went before, it was like all like ladies in their 40s. And they were like so jacked up to like see it. It was made it even better. So, and I feel like this one's going to be a lot goofier. Which that's cool.
Yeah. I think they're going to have so much of a... story.
Cody Horn vibe.
Yeah. Which I think the story part like almost surprised the audience because they were just like, what? We signed up for men dancing.
There's
Nice.
But this one's gonna be just super fun.
When does that
I
come
think so
out?
too.
I think it comes out in July.
Oh, super
I think that's right. Yeah.
July 1st. Yeah.
The trailer was like just awesome.
Yeah, it's fun.
It is fun.
Fun fact, it's Channing Tatum's birthday today.
Oh, there you go. Happy birthday, Mr. Magic Mike. What about you, Brendan? What are you most excited about?
Well, we talked about this on our show, I guess it was quite a few months ago, about anticipating our summer movie favorites, I guess what we're most looking forward to see. Mine still holds up, and I am most looking forward to Tomorrowland. This is one of the few that really looks like it's not a sequel, it's not a reboot or anything like that. It's based on it's inspired by a theme park, so to speak, in Disney World and Disneyland, I guess. But Brad Bird, I think, is one of the best directors working today. I will see anything with his name attached to it, and I love how the plot is still being kept under wraps, so they're definitely keeping a lot of secrets from us so we can go in as fresh as possible to this film. I am so ever enthralled to see Tomorrowland.
Yeah.
This is the one I'm still most excited for. Aside from that, though, and JD, I told you this yesterday when we were hanging out, but I was a bit skeptical about the new Disney Pixar film Inside Out, mainly because of the pattern and the track record that Pixar has had in the past couple films, which it's definitely not bad. I'd say it's just not up to par with what they've done since The Incredibles and Ratatouille and all those. But apparently this film was just screened at CinemaCon for over 3,000 people, and they claim that out of all those 3,000 people, all of them were crying at the end of this film. So hopefully this is hopefully something that's going to be bringing Pixar back to what I absolutely love most dear about them. And it's directed by Pete Docter, who gave us Up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And no arguments there. So Inside Out's another one I'm very much looking forward to, as well as the big ones.
Sure.
You got Jurassic World, you got Age of Ultron, you got Mad Max. I hear it was even previewed a bit, and people were frightened by how awesome it was. So we shall see. There's a lot, man. There's a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you, man, on Tomorrowland and Inside Out, and I actually am on record as being super excited for Inside Out a lot more than you are. I think the trailers have absolutely sold me. It looks absolutely compelling to me, and when you tell me that, it's not surprising, and I would hope that they try to pull on your heartstrings a little bit, given the sense that that's what this whole thing is all about anyway. So that makes a lot of sense, and I'm certainly excited for that. Of course, I'm really excited for Avengers Age of Ultron. I mean, I'm also on record as a huge Marvel guy. I've loved what they've done with these movies, and so I'm pretty excited to see where the next chapter takes us. And so Avengers would probably be my number one for my most anticipated for the summer, but Tomorrowland is like right there. It's like an inch behind Avengers Age of Ultron for all the reasons you said, Brendan. It looks so fascinating, and since I was at Disney World last weekend, when we went to Tomorrowland, I took a picture of the sign and I immediately texted you and said, aesthetically, it just reminds me of the trailer, and I just started thinking about the trailer more and the movie itself, and it just got me pumped up, just kind of being there and hearing the name, and the movie just looks really, really intriguing to me. I cannot wait to see it. So those three for sure I'm really hyped up about. Obviously Mad Max I'm also super excited for, and not just being a Tom Hardy fan, I'm obviously a big Tom Hardy fan. I love that George Miller is back to direct this, and that looks amazing. But I also think Nicholas Hoult is going to steal a lot of the show for me.
He looks insane.
He looks so insane.
What a lovely day! What a lovely day!
Yeah. I didn't even realize it was him at first, and then I saw him come up, and I was like, "Oh my god, that was him!"
Yeah, that was exciting.
He looks so awesome in this movie. So yeah, I cannot wait. Mad Max is certainly up there for me as well. Jurassic World, we're so in need of a good Jurassic Park movie. I didn't really care for 2 and 3 much. Of course, I loved the first one a lot, so I'm pretty excited for that. And one that I'm really interested in, I guess more intrigued than excited, is the Minions movie, because Despicable Me 2 almost crossed $1 billion. And most people, at least little kids and families and stuff, I think love the Minions in those movies more than anything else. So I could certainly see this movie crossing the $1 billion mark if Despicable Me 2 almost did it. And I didn't even like that movie very much. So especially if this is a good movie, I could certainly see that. I'm getting more and more excited for Fantastic Four the more I hear about it, and the more that comes out about it and more trailers we get looks kind of interesting. So another one I want to ask you guys about. So one of you, I can't remember, brought up Trainwreck, which is really interesting because there's like some not like big budget movies like that are coming out that I'm also excited. So not only am I excited for Trainwreck, but I would like to get your guys' thoughts on something like Straight Outta Compton. Have you guys seen those trailers? Is that something you're excited for? Because I can't wait to see that one. That one's pretty high up there for me as well.
I have not seen this trailer.
Me either.
Somebody dish.
Yeah, well, definitely go check.
I don't even know what the Upside Down, Inside Out, like whatever you're talking about.
Inside Out? It's the new Pixar movie.
Give that much care to what is it about? I haven't seen any marketing for this. Do you guys have kids?
Their trailer's out there.
When this comes out.
This comes out, I think, what was it, like mid-June?
Mid-June.
Yeah, something like that. So
Yeah, and it essentially takes place. It's a family that of a mom and dad and a little girl that apparently moved from Minneapolis, I think, to San Francisco to start a new life. She's like 12 years old, I think, and essentially it's about the 5 emotions in her head that are basically kind of battling for control of her. You've got joy, you've got sadness, you've got fear, anger, and disgust, and they're all different characters.
Yeah, they personify all those emotions. Yeah,
exactly. And you've got like Amy Poehler.
I thought it was like a dinosaur movie.
There is that coming out later in the year. That's like November, though, I think.
Yeah, that kept getting pushed back, I think. That was supposed to be out already, I heard.
Yeah, that was supposed to come out last year, I think.
Then I thought they like reanimated it or something.
I think they got a new director, a new crew kind of backing it up. So that's usually a recipe for, not, I wouldn't say disaster, but questionable.
Yeah.
So I really hope that's...
The title alone sounds like it's slightly more up my alley. What is that about?
It's about the up and coming of the NWA, the rap group.
Oh, is it like a doc or is it a drama?
No, it's a drama. Yeah, and Ice Cube's son is playing Ice Cube. It's awesome. It looks awesome.
Oh, you threw me through a loop because you mentioned Trainwreck before it, so I was thinking it was like a comedy.
No, I was kind of just referencing movies that are coming out this summer that aren't like these huge, big budget blockbusters.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah.
No, that sounds cool though.
Yeah, so there's that. There's what's another one? Southpaw with Jake Gyllenhaal. Have you guys seen the trailer for that?
Yeah, that's what does that come out like August? It's pretty far away.
I think like August 21st.
I hear a lot of interesting things though. Looks really.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by it, but the trailer really threw me for a loop because it pretty much gave away the whole movie. So
that's what I heard. So I didn't watch the trailer, but I was going to watch it regardless because of my Jake Gyllenhaal love. But
he's looking pretty ripped, so you have that too.
Which is like creepy because. I don't know,
from,
just from Nightcrawler to that, I'm like worried. I'm worried about your health, Jake.
Give this guy an Oscar already. Come on.
Yes, somebody, please.
I could accept the fact that the Lego Movie wasn't nominated for Best Animated Film, as angry as I was, but not nominating Jake Gyllenhaal for Nightcrawler, I wanted to screw you. Just screw you guys. Seriously.
Bad, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Well, what about any like small films or like indies coming out this summer that you guys are excited for?
Well, a smaller movie, which it's actually not really that small of a movie just because of the success of the last movie of its sort, but the next John Green movie, book-based movie is coming this summer. Yeah. And I have read almost all his books at this point, and I really like A Fault in Our Stars. And Paper Towns is the next one up. And I'm very like reserved about how to think about it because the story in it is very, at least in the book, very in the main character's head. But not like he's making it up, but it's just more so him thinking and contemplating about this girl that he's very interested in. So I want to see exactly how they play it all out. And the actress that they cast in the lead role is Cara Delevingne, who is a model with fantastic eyebrows, which is all I know about her at this point. So I'm curious to see if she is, going to completely break out from this role, and maybe if she's like the new hot thing to watch. But it's gonna be an interesting movie, I think.
Is she like best friends with Taylor Swift? Is that who I'm thinking of? That name sounds so familiar.
She's not the girl that looks like Taylor Swift, if that's what you're thinking of.
Not that girl. She's a model.
I'm not sure.
Maybe they're not friends. I might have made that up.
I feel like Taylor Swift is friends with everybody.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. The other thing that's intriguing for me about that, I did like The Fault in Our Stars as well, so I'm intrigued on that level. But the director for this movie is the same guy that did a movie in 2012 called Robot and Frank, which is a film that I quite loved as well. I thought it was an adorable little film. So all those pieces together has me a little bit intrigued for this one as well. And Lindsay, anything for you?
I don't have any.
Okay, Brendan?
I as far as like smaller indies, actually the only one I can think of right off the bat is there's this one called Me and Earl and the Dying Girl.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw a trailer for that, but it looks like
I did.
Essentially he's a filmmaker, and his buddy Earl, I guess they make films together in high school, and he becomes friends with this girl who's dying of cancer. So you kind of think of it as like your typical like indie coming of age kind of story, but something about it just looks so like kind of heartbreaking, but at the same time kind of lighthearted, that it almost seems kind of funny. I think it's going to be able to bridge that gap between dramedy very nicely, and the trailer just got me hooked. I like these kind of movies. I'm very biased to these kind of films. I always enjoy it, especially if it's going to be a good heartwarming story that just, I don't know if it's going to be a feel-good movie or not, but having said that, I think it looks good. I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, now that you mentioned it, sorry, I was just going to say they reviewed this on Slash Film, and they said really, really great things about it. And the year before that they said such positive things about like Short Term 12 that it just reminded me of like, okay, I'll have to listen to this.
Yeah.
Short Term 12, I think, was at least one of my top 2 films of that year. I would love that film.
Yeah, that's a really good choice too, and I think that was also a big hit at Sundance earlier this year, so I'm pretty intrigued for that as well. I also think Cameron Crowe is due for a big hit. He hasn't done anything great in a long time, but I really do dig a lot of his films. So, and he has Aloha coming out later, I think in June or at the end of May. And I'm pretty excited for that one. I also love the cast that has Emma Stone and Bradley Cooper in it and Rachel McAdams. So I'm pretty intrigued for that one. If that one hits on all cylinders, that has potential to be one of my favorite films of the summer as well. Outside of that, another one I'm looking forward to is Irrational Man, just because it's Woody Allen. He's hit or miss, but I like a lot of his hits. There's also The Look of Silence coming out July 17th. I don't know if you guys were a fan of The Act of Killing, but this is kind of the relook of this and the second part to The Act of Killing. So that one looks pretty intriguing as well. I've heard that it's just as heartbreaking, if not more heartbreaking than The Act of Killing. So, and then the last 2 that I'll just mention real fast is The Gift coming out, I think, in July. That is Joel Edgerton's directorial debut. And the marketing for that film has been intriguing. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but essentially what he's been doing is there are certain people that he'll find on Facebook, and he'll like take pictures off of their Facebook page, and then he mails them to people in the mail with some other promotional materials for the film. And so you get pictures of yourself in the mail. So how freaky is that? So that's been intriguing. And then I've been a huge fan of what Joe Swanberg has done the last couple of summers, and he has a new film coming out August 21st called Digging for Fire that I look forward to as well. Anything else on you guys' radar for the summer you want to mention before we get out of here for this week?
I just thought that the new Mission Impossible movie comes out this summer.
Yeah.
It's just so awesome that hopefully this,
I
even
forgot
if it's
about that one.
80% as good, will still be awesome.
Yeah, no kidding. That last shot in the trailer of him on the plane is just ridiculous. It's so good.
To know he really did that too.
know.
I mean, of course he really did that.
Did,
I mean,
yeah.
It's Tom Cruise, and I have so much respect for him at that. I am very much anticipating. I forgot to mention this one. Yeah, this is definitely on my list of one of the most anticipated of the summer, along for me with Pitch Perfect 2.
Yes.
Of all things.
How did I forget that? Yeah.
I am so looking forward to Pitch Perfect 2. The first Pitch Perfect, I wouldn't even call it a guilty pleasure. I'd call it a very good movie. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good one as well. I know that Lindsay and Jess, I'm sure you guys are up for Ted 2 later this summer.
Yeah, hopefully that's good.
Yeah, I have reservations for sure.
I do too. I don't like. I guess Mila Kunis is not in it, right?
No, I don't think she is.
So that like throws me through a loop already. That they're gonna like completely change that storyline.
Yeah, because it annoys me when they sort of force that sort of dynamic into a sequel when they already tied something up there.
I know. Yeah, that's kind of annoying. I agree.
I'm sure it'll be fun. I like the first one a lot.
Maybe we'll find out that they are together and she's only traveling on business or something like that.
Yeah, she's away for a while.
Yeah.
She's in India as a peace somewhere or something.
Yeah.
As long as it's better than A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
Ugh.
Anyway, I think that should do it for this week's segment of our summer preview. So hopefully there's a lot of good films, a lot of good potential big films and small films alike. So good segment, guys. Great talk.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's hope they live up to that potential, because if they don't, I think there's going to be anarchy.
Exactly. Absolutely.
But everyone out there, let us know if you agree or disagree with what we're looking forward to in our anticipations, and let us know what you're looking forward to. You can let us know by leaving a comment on our Facebook or Twitter, or email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com.
All right, well, before we get out of here, thanks, Lindsay and Jess, for being here. It was a huge pleasure having you guys on the show this week.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell us, where can we find your lovely podcast, French Toast Sunday?
You can go to FrenchToastSunday.com. You can find us there. You can search us on iTunes with the same name. But everything's pretty easily accessible through FTS. So just go to FrenchToastSunday.com.
And where can we find you on social media?
We are on Twitter, and it's at FTS Tweets, because French Toast Sunday was too long. And you can go to Facebook.com/French Toast Sunday. But really, everything's at the main hub if you forget any of those things I just said, and you can go there. Oh, we're also on Instagram. We post sporadically.
Yeah, we will not overpower your Instagram feed.
And that's it.
Awesome. Well, definitely go follow these very smart ladies. They have a really lovely podcast that I would highly, highly recommend. It's really good stuff. And thanks again, guys, for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Talk to you again this weekend next year.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So I'll mark it down in the calendar right now. So, all right. Well, that should do it for this week's show. Just a reminder to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/InSession Film. You can also follow us on Twitter at InSession Film, and on Google Plus and YouTube, just search InSession Film and sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can sign up for that on Facebook by clicking the newsletter tab, or on our site at InSessionFilm.com/newsletter.
And for more thoughts on the films that we watch, you can check us out on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. You can also email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. We try to respond to every piece of email that we get. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes and on Stitcher. And while you're on iTunes, you could please leave us a review. We'd appreciate some feedback on that medium as well. And also, lastly, you could check out our Listen Now page, which is on our website at InSessionFilm.com/listen-now.
And the InSession Film Podcast is supported by our super awesome listeners like you. Once again, if you want to help support us, just go to our website at InSessionFilm.com. You can click on our fun bonus content tab on our main menu to hear that bonus content for just a small donation of 99 cents. You can also check out the InSession Film store, or just go to InSessionFilm.com/donate. And you'll see a bunch of information there on how you can help us out. And one thing that I would highly recommend is checking out our mobile app, where you can hear everything we do under one roof for just a one-time fee of $1.99. You can find that app on the Amazon Market for Android devices, the Windows 8 phone store for Windows devices, and the Podcast Box app for iOS devices. All those details are on the site at InSessionFilm.com/apps. As for next week on the show, of course, we're going to be reviewing Age of Ultron, the latest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which should be a lot of fun. And we will have the guys from Simplistic Reviews joining us as well, so that should be really interesting. Before we get out of here, Jess, Lindsay, any final thoughts on anything before we leave today?
Looking forward to the summer.
Yep.
And David Fincher for life.
David Fincher.
Too bad there's not a Fincher movie coming out this summer.
That's what I was thinking. I was like,
I know.
I'll just knock him out of the house.
What do you guys think about that talk of a Gone Girl sequel? Would you want to see that?
I'm not particularly. I wouldn't, but I know that Gillian Flynn is interested in it. She's thought the concept could be cool, but I feel like if they did it, they should set it farther in the future.
Yeah, I'd rather get a Girl with the Dragon Tattoo sequel if I had to pick one or the other.
Me too.
Yeah,
but that's
Me too.
All right. Any final thoughts for you, Brendan, before we get out of here?
I'm gonna get back to Daredevil.
Yeah, dude, that's been amazing. So I've debated, we don't talk about TV on this show, but I've thought about maybe discussing that on an extra film, because it does tie into the MCU. So, I mean, it's kind of relevant, I guess.
Well, maybe if we don't have a third segment picked for Age of Ultron, if we're all caught up with it, maybe it could be a third thing there.
Yeah, absolutely.
JD.
Yeah, do whatever you want to do.
That's true. It is.
Your show.
It is our show. We can do whatever we want. So, yeah, I might do that. Speaking of our extra film, though, I guess for my final thought before we get out of here, we are going to be discussing Ex Machina. We finally got it in our area, and we're going to be discussing that on our extra film this week with Mr. Brendan Cassidy, who's going to be joining us for that. So that should be a lot of fun as well. I cannot wait to discuss that. It has, I've heard some amazing things about it. So,
at first I thought the movie was Ex Machina.
It does kind of read that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, it's based on the Latin, so it's Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah. So
I say Ex Machina.
Machina. That sounded Mexican for a second.
It does look awesome. I look forward to it. Absolutely. We're going to be discussing that as well as The Water Diviner, which is directed by Russell Crowe, his directorial debut. So all of that should be a lot of fun. Stay tuned for that later on this week. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks once again, Jess and Lindsay, for joining us. And we'll see you guys next time on the InSession Film Podcast. For the entire version of our podcast, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, or check us out online at InSessionFilm.com.